typically do with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you don't mind joining.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to say it in French? Where is Maria?
Maria wasn't able to make it today, so we'll miss her today, but we will look forward to
That'd be like unacceptable.
the beauty of our meeting process is that we are going to jump right into a presentation, discussion, and update of our Irvington strategic plan. I will hand it off to Dr. Harris.
So good evening, everyone. Certainly a pleasure to be here to talk about the ongoing work in the school district. And when we think about a strategic plan, we not only think about our objectives and our goals, but we think about our process. And when we consider this process, I want everyone to take a second and reflect on the quote that's up on the screen at this point from FDR. We cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. And in thinking about that, I think about us as a school district, as parents, as educators, as board trustees, that this is what we're about. This is what our goal is, and it's to prepare our children for their future. And in a world that's going to be rapidly changing. So with that said, when we think about a strategic vision, we think about our process and how we landed here and what the purpose was. And we certainly know that there was different levels of engagement, different conversations in this room. But it was to come to some common focus, some agreement on where we were going to move with our future, to be able to name what our aspirations were as a school community, and to be able to begin to identify what that will look like as we move forward. And in that process, we have to think of all the different components that lead into that. And of course, there's curriculum instruction and rich extracurricular experiences and co-curricular programs. But we can't lose sight of facilities and budget, because they all link back to what that mission is for the school district and that quote that I referenced before. So when we think about the vision and living it, it's just not words on paper. And when we think about all that goes on, it's what's happening in schools on a daily basis. And when we think about this vision, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of being. When we think back to the beginning of this school year, our planning began to link with this in a way it hadn't before. And when we're moving forward, we're going to have those clear, obvious connections that are going to be an important part of that. So we've launched a process, and a process that is beginning to bring the strategic plan to life. So when we think about what that looks like, there's many, many different facets to that. And we certainly think about our annual goals, and from a district perspective, from a school perspective, from a department perspective. And this year, for the first time, and at least since I've been on board, we took effort to align each and every goal, every objective in a school with a strategic objective. And in doing so, we produced a singular document that outlines all of the work that we are leading in the school district. And we know that these goals need to be outcome-based and identify indicators of success. We know that there needs to be process here. We know that there needs to be ongoing updates and communication with the board and the community, and that we're certainly going to go about doing that. When we think about anything that we do now, it is going to go through the frame of a strategic vision. And not only is it going to be those formal things that happen when we think about making decisions related to budget, when we think about proposing new initiatives, but it's all the other work behind the scenes. The work associated with curriculum and instruction, for example, when we think of professional development planning and plans, when we think about renewing our technology plan down the road, and when we think about addressing facility plans, it lives and breathes through all of that. One other important thing that we are taking a step doing as a part of this process, and not referenced on the slide, is that we are going to publish a strategic plan document. and a document that's now in draft form. And it's going to be something to help the community fully understand and appreciate what this work is. And we'll have a good reference point. So when we think about that linkage that we want to make, and if there's a deeper question or someone new comes into the community, there's a resource we can focus people on that will talk about where we're headed as a school community. So when we think about our strategic objectives here, we know that we've talked before that there are 6. And generally speaking, they're all encompassing. But at the end, I can promise you we're going to come back and reflect on them a little bit. And I don't want to read to the board and the audience, and certainly the board is quite familiar with them. But we've worked through different areas and different objectives that came through our process. And the first truly focuses on what we're focusing on in the classroom, thinking about that type of learning experience we want our children to have to ensure that it's rigorous, comprehensive, and rich and diversified, and that we value the use of technology within that. We think about supporting our educators, and in doing so, that's professional development, professional learning. We want to have an atmosphere where there's creativity and we encourage innovation, and innovation comes in multiple ways and multiple fronts. Of course, that can be our educators, but it also needs to be giving our students that space and motivation to introduce innovation into our environment. Thinking about the culture and the role that our children have in our society, strengthening connections to our community, and of course the fiscal health and the financial side of our work here in the school district. The one challenge that we always have to see, we can be as ambitious as we want today, and we know, and we can just look down the coast to Washington, D.C., and to see what impacts are going to come from tax reform on communities like Irvington, counties like Westchester. We have to know that there's certain aspects of our environment that we can't control. So we think of tax cap, we think of state aid that we can't influence. We think of the ups and downs of required pension contributions and health care costs. And then we think of New York State and federal budgets and those impacts here. There's also that idea that new mandates continue to come down and ways that we have to find to fund them, and we will give a little window into some of that throughout this budget process. As you can imagine, there's some newbies for us to deal with in the coming year. We have to think about our student needs. Student needs shift on a regular basis, and that's not just thinking about students that are new to Irvington, but thinking about the children that we have here in our schools today. And that we have to make sure that we're not just reacting, that we're being proactive to support our children's needs. And then finally, thinking about maintenance of our schools and having a responsible budget, and a budget that is something that is fair to our community while balancing our priorities and our needs for our children. So that said, we want to dig in a little bit and highlight a few points of the work that we have ongoing right now, and then tip our cap in some of the things that are on the horizon. So I'm going to invite Dr. Kaur to speak to some of the instruction-related slides.
Sure. So when we were preparing for tonight, I think definitely in terms of timing, in sense of order, this would be better placed before the buildings. Because what you're going to see tonight in these next coming slides are things that have really already been shared, possibly, through the building action plans. And that's the way a good strategic plan should look. The curriculum and instruction goals that we've identified and the objectives we've identified should play out at the building level. Chris and I can talk to you all day about what we think or what it should be, but in the end, it's the actions and the goals that are set at the building level that actually will realize the goals of the objectives of our strategic plan. So in looking at tonight, we thought, well, actually, when we went back and we looked at the building plans, that's where a lot of this is. But we did want to share a few examples of what's going on this year, and then also some of the things that we've started to talk about for next year, or moving forward, I should say, based on these objectives. So this year, as you know, we introduced PLTW to grade 5.
Stop you right there. I think we always got to say what the acronyms are.
Oh, Project Lead the Way.
Which is engineering and
STEM-based program at the elementary. So in introducing Project Lead the Way at the 5th grade, some of you might actually remember that when we introduced Project Lead the Way several years ago, our hope and goal was that we would be able to push it back and up and down in both directions, so that by now we almost had a K-5 program. But that speaks to what Chris was talking about with the limitations. So while that was a really good idea, when we set out into the next budget year, we had other priorities that were equal and part of really where we are now, so we had to make some decisions. And so we were pleased this year that we were able to make the decision to add 5th grade. In addition, the middle school, David and Allison were able to bring green architecture, which is one of the specialty programs for Project Lead the Way, and it's really an elective in 8th grade, and for students who are able to take it at the time of day that it can be taken. So again, less than perfect, but a way for us to expand the opportunity for our 8th grade students. Interdisciplinary writing. Several years ago, when we launched our freshman writing program, our goal around that program was to create a foundation of writing for our students that would support them throughout their high school career as well as into college. And we were really developing it from the ground up with some of our really strong writing teachers. And one of the immediate feedback we got from kids after the first year, when they looked at the units they did throughout the year, the most helpful units to our students were the units where the English teachers helped them with their technical writing from some of the content area courses. So there's no question that was good, really good feedback for us. This year, our science teachers, our 9th grade science teachers, so our bio teachers, are working with our English teachers, and they're doing a combined writing unit. So the students will be working in bio, they'll be doing research and writing, and the English teachers through the freshman writing program will be providing feedback on students as writers in that, for that paper. The really amazing thing that is happening as you listen to their conversation is, you know, science teachers feel, well, I'm not a teacher of English, and English teachers feel, well, I'm not a teacher of science. And the students will actually see a grade through both lenses, as writers, as well as their ability to communicate the science content that is being required for the paper. I want to say either at the beginning of the year or the end of last year, what you heard a little bit about from both Dow's Lane and Main Street School are math stations. So we have expanded that over the summer. We offered an advanced level of teaching using math stations in the elementary classroom to a group of teachers who had taken Math Stations 1 the prior summer. So, and teachers who had not taken it were able to take the first level course. And now it's become commonplace to walk into our elementary classrooms and see teachers using Math Stations. One of the main goals, when we first rolled out Engage New York, some of the frustration with our teachers was they felt like they were taking the fun out of math. So they were becoming better teachers of mathematics, and they felt that there was a good foundation of math being taught to kids, but that there was like sort of a lack of joyfulness around teaching mathematics and designing it. So Math Stations has not only, I think, really started to bring that back into our classrooms, but one of our main goals is increasing self-reliance in our students. So those are just 3 examples of steps, actions, programs that we're taking that support this strategic objective. Moving forward, we continue to have a desire to increase and really be able to say we have a K-12 STEM program. Right now, our K through 2 students do not have that. Eventually, through the implementation of the Next Gen Science standards, that requires engineering as part of the program, but we do not have that in place. So we really believe that we need to round out that initiative and priority that we set several years ago. We plan to develop a scope and sequence for technology instruction. One of the realities is, some of you may remember from last year, we don't really have a teacher who's teaching technology at the elementary level right now. Our technology teacher is really focusing on the Project Lead the Way program in grades 3, 4, and 5. So that is something that we hope to develop, but it also requires staffing. Expanding the integration of technology. Now with Wi-Fi at the elementary level, we are very interested in increasing the integration of technology, not only looking at the skills, but also having clear changes in the way we do business, the way that we teach, not just using technology as an add-on, but K through 12, that it really should be changing the way our students are interacting and learning through the use of technology. Expanding opportunities and access to world language. We've started that conversation. We are certainly committed to enrichment and providing opportunities through clubs, and I see my world language friends are here in the audience tonight. And I think we had a really nice conversation last week, but there's definitely limitations to where we can go with that right now. And we're very interested in expanding the conversation to figure out what really is a viable model for the Irvington School District. And then last but certainly not least is defining K-12 research inquiry. How do we ensure that that's part of our work? I do think there's, again, New York State, here's a moment, is actually helping us with this a little bit in defining the new standards. They're good. They're really good. They're smart. They cross concept from one area of science to another. They really can do a good job, but implementing them is a little bit of a bear. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us, but it clearly is steeped in this concept of inquiry. So we want to ensure that there is ongoing inquiry and research in all of our classrooms, K through 12. I don't have the control. I don't like not having control. So objective 2, supporting educators through professional learning. So actually, Chris and I talked about we're getting this one out of being objective 2. That would be a shift in just the structure. It feels like objective 3 should come next. So actually, can we talk through 3 and then we can pop back to 2? So objective 3, again, 1 and 3 are really about students, and objective 2 is really more about teachers. So examples from this year, the expansion of speaking as a goal in our world language classrooms. I love this story. The other day, one of our Spanish teachers had a goal in the classroom. Her outcome for that day was that students would remain in dialogue without breaking dialogue for 3 minutes. Our kids went 6 minutes. And if that isn't evidence of the commitment to our learning goal being that kids will speak in the targeted language in that classroom, and then evidence of that. So we're excited. Teachers are changing what they're doing in their classrooms. We're still doing we're not abandoning the grammar and the writing, but we know that speaking needs to be the target. So definitely the expansion of that goal. Introduction to Google Expeditions, some of you might have seen or experienced. I don't know if Jesse did that here, if he brought did he bring them? How did you see it, Dave? From your own experience in your own school. So does everyone know what Google Expeditions is? The kids, they wear the goggles, and it takes them to places all over the world. And it's the integration of technology. It definitely is, it's innovative, and it's engaging kids in certainly a new way. Our teachers are figuring out, again, how it's not just a fun add-on, because we can do lots of fun add-ons, but really, how does it enhance the curriculum? How does it take our students to deeper levels of learning through these opportunities that they could not have had before? Improved Innovation Fund. So the Innovation Fund, Chris developed that 4 years ago now, and it was such a great idea, and our students have benefited. And this year, Jesse Lubinsky has taken it over in terms of the oversight and management, and Jesse's doing an awesome job. He's creating structures and guidelines and elevating the engagement of our students. Our students are connecting with outside mentors to help them think through their ideas. So the Innovation Fund is, again, it's an opportunity when you look at that objective, encourage innovation, creativity, and risk-taking. That's what we're working toward. That's what we want to ensure that our students are provided with on a regular basis in our schools. So again, looking forward, there is some overlap. The completion of STEM fits in here as well. It's through a little bit of a different lens, but it absolutely fits here. We are very anxious to begin the planning for implementation of capstone projects where students are taking the learning from a variety of courses and experiences and using their own innovation, motivation to identify a topic they're interested in learning more about. Some of you may have heard a little bit about, we have a 3rd grade teacher and a 5th grade teacher who are engaging students in Genius Hour. It's a ongoing place where students identify something they have a passion for. Some people call them passion projects. And it is amazing to see when you give kids the opportunity to engage in something that of interest, how motivated our students can be. Redesigned classrooms. This year we have redesigned classrooms in every building using different kinds of furniture, experimenting with what's the kind of furniture that our students opt to sit on. If you walk into our 5th grade classroom where the IEF funded flexible seating, you see kids sitting and sort of laying and standing in all different ways at different times, depending on the activity they're doing, depending on how they're feeling at that moment, whether that's sort of settled and peaceful or fidgety and need to move. And I think we're all like that, even when we're not kids. So this flexible seating is definitely giving students the opportunity to decide for themselves, how do I learn best? Where maybe sitting at a desk isn't really the best way for me for 40 minutes. So we have high school classrooms where students can stand or on rolly chairs and more of a seminar seating environment. So we really believe that the fostering flexible and diverse learning, redesign classrooms that foster flexible and diverse learning goals work in concert together. They're not in isolation, so it's not just let's get some fun furniture, it's how does the furniture inform our teaching and learning. And then last but not least on that list is the district technology plan. So that was a plan that is now probably 3 years old. It's ready to go under revision and revamping, and Jesse and I are talking about the process for doing that. But we're anxious to do it. We've made some nice strides, considering our very, very, very limited human resource staff around technology, but we're also ready to do some revision work and update it so that it's a little bit more reflective of where we're going and what we've done. So if I flip back now to objective 2, the professional learning. So none of this happens without professional development. I shouldn't say none of it. Some of it actually does. But if we have targeted, clear goals as a district, we want to ensure some baseline of professional learning for all of our teachers within a department, a grade level, a school. So certainly the teaching of writing or BARD work has been pretty profound. There's not an English classroom that we walk into 6 through 12 where we don't see some evidence of BARD practices being tried, and that's where we are right now. We're in a try-it mode. Today is a full day of these 9-12 high school teachers working with our consultant, Helen Pashley, who is an expert in not only in science, she's been providing professional learning for teachers for, I don't know, at least probably 25 years. She also is very connected to New York State in the development of the standards. And today she worked with our high school teachers on how do we start to shift the practices in our classroom. The reality is that old lecture models do not align with the new standards. There is an expectation that students are engaged, that there is an inquiry focus, that we embed, there needs to be engineering components, there needs to be cross-cutting concepts. So if you're teaching one area of science, there's an expectation that you're helping students to see links to other areas of science so that it's not one-dimensional, it's actually three-dimensional. There's an expectation for performance assessment, that it's pen and paper is fine, and there's definitely a place for it on a regular basis, but it can't be the only form of assessment. So how do we ensure that we're assessing students for the kinds of thinking and skills that they would be demonstrating out in the world, and certainly in college and beyond? The Google Master Class this summer, we at Irvington hosted a series of workshops for the region, and we were excited. Many of our teachers attended. And again, the Master Class is about embedding 21st century thinking, whether that be hyperdocs, linking and having lots of different resources that teachers are going to and that students are using, using questioning for, as a way to promote inquiry in the classroom. So our professional learning is very diverse right now in Irvington. We have very targeted professional development. So when I say that, content specific, and then we have broader professional development that really leads to different kinds of instructional design in the classroom. Moving forward, we would like to hope to continue our in-house professional development. Having our in-house people who are sitting in the room when we bring people in, what that does is our Sarah and Nancy and Christine, they then take the work of the consultant and they continue to implement that and partner with the teachers on a regular basis. It's the most powerful and the most systemic kind of professional development you can provide. We want to continue to remain responsive, making sure that we're assessing what teachers need and responding, and there should be a point where not all teachers need the same thing, so we need to ensure that we're identifying what individual teachers need as well as groups of teachers. Increasing the consistency and of assessment, making sure that all courses are being assessed in the same way, as well as development of assessments are being done collaboratively. And as you know, we are looking forward to developing a calendar of ongoing release so that our teachers have regular release time to be doing this kind of work.
So as we transition off that last point, that's a conversation that we'll be having in this room beginning in February about what that calendar can begin to look like. But as always, we're waiting for information from State Ed to bring some requirements with respect to the standards that we're to follow. So when we think about strategic objective number 4, this is something that is alive and well in our schools in a variety of different ways. But through our work this year, and this is where I think we talk about a strategic plan being flexible, is that we're starting to see a need for this objective to be broader than it is. Because what we see that we're missing throughout our strategic plan is more of a focus on the social emotional learning piece, the character ed type component of our work. So we have lots going on in our schools related to it, and there's initiative and planning, but we're not naming it. So when we come to the end, we want to think about not only how we reorder these, so there's some sequence to it that makes more sense, but we think we need to revise this particular objective to make it more meaningful and relevant to the work that we need to do in our schools. So when we think about, as it stands today, and thinking about creating a culture where our students are active participants in society, we do have examples that are occurring in our schools. And great evidence of this is checking out the district Facebook page, because you'll find stories about each of these. And when we think about our Dow's Lane students partnering with a school in Puerto Rico, they've had initial rounds of all different types of collections and fundraising to support their immediate needs following the hurricane and the devastation that was seen there. But now there's a plan for a second round and trying to make connections with the school again in January, identifying needs and working with them, with the ultimate goal of that when they're on their feet, when there's ample communication structures, that we're going to have a partnership with this school moving forward. We think at Main Street School, our students are involved in a Be a Friend project as ambassadors. And really what that is a national initiative to combat bullying and to support those that are victims of bullying. And what our students do is literally engage in writing friendly, supportive letters to kids that are struggling with bullying in different places around the country. We think about our middle school, who just last Friday completed one of their midnight runs, where there's collections of clothing, preparation of meals for homeless in the city, and then they actually make the run into the city to deliver to those in needs. When we think about our students, and we referenced before, some of the many innovative things that happen, the high school isn't alone, but a lot of it's student-driven. When I think of initiatives that are occurring like Main Street and other places, a lot of it's coming from students that are motivated to want to make a difference. And at the high school, there's so many different community service projects, fundraising, and social awareness campaigns. I know we talk about the power of our kids and the innovation, but really that's an opportunity for partnerships with our staff and our students to really engage our kids in meaningful exercises outside of school. But when we think about the future, we have to think of ways to further expand student voice and engage kids deeper in our community, and to do so in a global sense. Not only thinking about Irvington, thinking about supporting our friends and neighbors and those around the country, but what is that connection across the globe? A lot of that, as I said before, can be accomplished through student clubs and student leadership experiences. We have a number of different clubs, and we talk about it in this room a couple times a year, but clubs really grow out of student interest and student goals, and we want to build opportunities for kids. So each and every year we begin to evaluate what needs are and what comes to the table, and assess whether more funding is needed to support these opportunities. When we think about student leadership experiences, that grows through club activities, providing students with that voice to bring their ideas out into the world. But we also have to start to consider what formal structures and experiences look like, and be able to build those opportunities for kids to develop leadership skills. And then comes in that last point that I referenced before, where it makes us want to reframe this strategic objective, and thinking about the social emotional learning. And not only is it how we support kids, but understanding those underlying factors related to wellness. And we can think of that as emotional well-being. We can think about that as physical well-being. So we're actually beginning to have conversation in our schools about how we can increase our focus on this. But the piece to this that's important is that this is a broader community initiative as well. So we can think about things that are happening in our schools and having different types of yoga or meditation experiences in every one of our schools this year. But also, how do we step back and think about some of those other challenges that are there when we know that in our own adult worlds, we're feeling stress and anxiety in ways that we haven't in the past. So how do we process that through a 15-year-old mind, a 12-year-old mind, a 6-year-old mind? And how do we be able to support kids and equip them with skills to be successful in navigating those challenges? Objective number 5 speaks about the community. It speaks about ownership and folks being connected to our schools and having those important opportunities to be able to engage in and understand. And this year, we've taken effort to improve our weekly school and district communications. That you can sit back and you know that Main Street School comes on Thursday night. Dow's Lane comes on Sunday night, middle school and high school on Friday, and the district on Saturday. We're looking at opportunities to not only to see when we're best connecting with parents, but the types of information that folks are interested in receiving. When we think about other opportunities, connections, fundraising are something that we do, but school spirit and school pride are something that's very important and something that where we think about athletics being a high school or even a middle school opportunity, that level of pride and involvement trickles all the way through down to Dow's Lane. And this year we are excited to partner with some wonderful supportive members of our community to launch the Bulldog Booster Club, which is taking an active role on that front. We also introduced our new district identity and logo. So when you look at the screen today, you see the new district logo, top right-hand corner. You see that popping up in all of our school communications. Little things that you may not think about when you look at the font. That's now our Irvington font. So you will see that popping up all around the place. So when you begin to see things, there's going to become a look and a feel that's going to be Irvington UFSD. But when we think about the future, we know there's lots of work still to be done on this front. And this spring, we're going to be launching a new website. And a website that's not only going to be easier to navigate, but it's going to become a resource for our community. It's going to be contemporary in the sense that it's going to have lots of opportunity for multimedia interface. It's going to be something that's going to read well on a mobile device. But we're thinking about how do we make this a tool for the community that it's really going to become a portal of information to help you understand our schools and to help you support your children on their journey through our schools. We want to think about opportunities for continued expansion of that district identity. So we've had partnership with not only the Booster Club, but in the PTSA and starting to put spirit wear out there. But I see it going to another level. Think about when you ride through a college town and you look at the light posts and telephone poles, you see those banners. You think of things that when you pull into Irvington, what's going to make you think about the schools? We want to think about consistency of signage. We want to think about resources that we put out there. So we want to make sure that we're really building that brand. Recently, I read an article that was in a school business official magazine that Carol shared with me. And it talked about that idea of school identity. And an educator that's normally out there and thinking about 21st century learning and global competitiveness, Young Zhao, was actually talking about branding and school identity and saying that the importance of a school taking control of something such as this. Because if you're not identifying your own brand, someone else is doing it for you. And so we're starting to make sure that we're writing that narrative for our school district. And then thinking about our communication campaigns to bolster knowledge, ownership, and pride in our school community. And I have lots of ideas how we're going to begin to advance that work moving forward. Carol?
Okay, so slides 1 through 5 cost a lot of money. So
How are you going to manage that?
So that's where the ensuring the fiscal health of the district comes in. And so obviously what we're doing right now is starting our budget process, and that's key. And as we do that, we're going through everything that we're doing, we're looking at the strategic plan as part of that. So that's one of the key components of our fiscal health that I work on. But it's really we all work on. I don't work on it. We all work on that as a group. This year, we've been fortunate to really focus on our facilities. We put some extra money in our budget this year. We took care of some of the paving issues, some of the really egregious things that we had going on. But we have a lot more to do there, so we're going to keep working on that. We've also focused this year on preventive maintenance, which is something that can be a cost savings for us, because the more we can prevent issues from happening, the less money you're paying in the long run for some of these things, especially like some of our HVAC, things that aren't really like interesting to talk about, but things that are very important. And of course, well-maintained facilities are important to the students, because if they're in an environment where they feel comfortable and it's presentable, it's clean, it's well organized, then they're apt to learn better and take care of it better. Actually, that's what a lot of the research presents as well. Hand in hand with that is risk management review, and that really entails not just looking at your insurance contracts and making sure that you're well insured or covered, but it's also how do you mitigate things that could become possible irritants to your insurance or your day. And it's not just, it's looking at facilities, so it's hand in hand with the facilities, a lot of it. It's also employee training, how to do things properly. We spend a lot of time on that. Hazardous material training, employee safety, things like that. So a lot of risk management is going on this year, as well as I undertake that going on this year. Going forward for the future, we need still a lot of work on the facilities. We are starting the process for the capital planning process. That's going to be a year-long focus. It's going to take a while and involve the community on that one. Part of the fiscal management is looking at the long term, and the long-range budget is something that I'm working on. It's important to have a sense of where you're going to be in a few years. Not so easy to always do, but because things change and you don't always have a crystal ball in terms of what the market's going to do and things like that. But that said, we do know what certain factors we do know, and that will help. So I've been really working on that, using the past to predict the future a little bit, and learning using some of the analytical tools that I have to my advantage to work on that. With that, every day we're doing it as an effort to identify fiscal efficiencies. Where can I save? Purchasing procedures, going out to bid on things, competition, piggybacking on other bids. There's all kinds of things we're working on there, and that's an everyday occurrence. I have a super duper, business team there that's doing a lot of this for us, and I'm very proud of what they do. Same thing with a request for proposals. That's basically when you go out and say, I'm using this company, but maybe that we should be seeing what else we should be doing. And every couple of years you're doing that. So that's something we're doing. Right now we're doing it for an architect, but we'll be doing that for our auditing and all the major services that we work with. And then finally, reserve fund management and planning. That's just something that you really need to be aware of to make sure that our reserves are adequate, that we're not in any fiscal stress, that we are not going to find that something that we didn't plan for is going to affect slides 1 through 5, the objectives 1 through 5. So we need to make sure that we're always on the, planning for the future in that area. So those are basically the key fiscal health issues. I could probably talk longer, but that's the key ones. So.
Great. Thank you. So the one question that continues to come up, and something that we grapple with through a variety of different lenses, is that question, how will we know? And when we think about how will we know, how will we know how well we're doing? How will we know what our needs are going to be? So when we think about that, we think about assessment tools that we have placed in our classrooms and helping teachers better understand student growth and student learning. And I would draw everyone's attention to the wonderful presentation that Dr. Kaur gave a month ago that was provided tremendous insight into the work that's happening in our schools. And a component of that is that daily instruction, formative instruction that is vital to teachers understanding student needs. But we're also thinking about that development of benchmark assessments that are common assessments across grade levels at end of units, so you can step back and look holistically how groups of students are doing, how individuals compare to a group, how particular classes of students are doing in comparison to the rest of a grade level, and which becomes really a tool to help us understand and measure some of the effectiveness of our curriculum, and then, of course, the instruction that's occurring in individual classrooms. While we always downplay standardized data, there's value to it, and we don't walk away from that, and we utilize that as yet another tool. But some areas that we are really looking to take a step in a new direction, and is to start to develop new data sets to help inform our work as a school district. The first is the administration of surveys to our school community. And this spring, we're going to start with a first district-wide survey that's going to be looking at a number of different areas, but we want to get a sense of the quality of experience and start to understand the perceptions about the school experience from parents, from staff members, and from students. And in our mind, we see that growing into a regular process where we may have 1 or 2 surveys a year that will be developmental in helping inform our work, and may also seek opportunities to solicit feedback on targeted areas. I know 2 years ago we did a survey on food services, and that's going to help inform an RFP this year. If we're talking about the development of a capital bond, we may seek feedback related to some priorities related to capital needs. So that's going to become a part of our culture, increase feedback loops within our community. And then, there's been lots of conversation about how do we know if something is working, and whether that's an initiative, a new program that we introduce. So in doing so and moving forward, one thing that Dr. Kaur and I are working with the administrative team on is beginning to develop a program assessment model, so that when we launch a new program, that we go into it with clear set goals and metrics that we're going to be looking for to be able to evaluate whether or not we're achieving those goals throughout the program's implementation, to assure that we're providing a program that meets our goals and is certainly serving our students well. So when we think about moving forward, and as Dr. Kaur said earlier, that when we think about this conversation, this is that higher level conversation, the conversation that really should have happened earlier in the year, preceding our conversation in and around goals for schools, departments, and of course the district. But this is a process that we're tuning, and a process that we're determined to enhance every single year. But when we think about where we're going for the balance of this year, there's lots of opportunity to see the strategic plan come to life in a variety of different ways. January 23rd, we have what's becoming our annual administrator trustee roundtable, where we'll have our school and department leaders seated around the table with our board. And the administrators are going to talk about the work this year, but then they're going to start to talk about the goals for next year and the needs for next year. So that's going to talk about program. That's going to talk about student needs. It's going to reference facility needs. And then that grows right into our budget process. That starts about a month later, where we're going to see items that we've talked about tonight begin to surface as some financial requests and priorities. You're going to see it grow out of the conversation that we have on the 23rd. And then we kind of, as we go through the budget process, we're going to be setting and starting to set the stage for our goals for the following year. But before we close out this school year in this room, we're going to have a reflection on our goals and a report on our progress from the 17-18 goals, and then, of course, plan for the 18-19 school year. And then I think the one final point that I want to draw us back to that Dr. Kaur and I both spoke to is that, as I said, this is a fluid document. It's a document that's really intended to be able to be flexible enough to support what our needs are. And Raina spoke of that need to maybe reorder the goals so there's a greater flow, and it reads in that idea of having student-facing goals before the staff-centered goals come in a particular order. But when we think about strategic objective number 4, that social-emotional learning component is missing, and that we would like to play with tweaking that. And one proposal that we came up with, Dr. Kaur and myself, over the last couple of weeks was foster the social and emotional growth of all students and promote a culture where students are active participants in society. So it holds true to that original objective that came from the community process, one that the board was supportive of, but it also wraps in that important social emotional component. So tonight, I hope that you've got a different flavor for how the strategic plan has really come to life in our schools. We tried not to focus on too much of things that we've already talked about, but to foreshadow our process and to see how this is going to live and breathe through our work on an annual basis. So that said, Mr. Hanna, questions?
Thank you very much, yes. So I would open the floor up to some questions. Maybe we'll start with you, Catherine, if you have some.
So, when I look at this first, by the way, it's great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
If you were to describe what Irvington schools look like 5 years from now, or what skills or behaviors the students in the future exhibit that they don't exhibit now, where are we going?
So, you know, it's interesting in saying something like that, and I'm flipping to something for a reason. You know, that, and I would say you would get a similar response from so many of the educators, because we talk about the district really becoming an aligned K-12 system of learning. I'm immediately drawn back to our theories of action and thinking about who our students are as learners, and thinking about the dispositions that we're focusing on in teaching, and being problem solvers, flexible thinkers, communicators, students that are self-reliant, and so on. So there's a culture that's being built. But when I step back and when I think about where we're going to be, there's going to be a flavor and a voice to Irvington that's going to be different than what else is out there. There's going to be a piece when we talk about that Young Zhao reference that I had before, and that what we're doing now is we're defining who we are, and it's going to be that top-level education. But we're going to be a school district that has rich programs K through 12 in all the core content areas, that we're going to have a STEM program that is rich and has opportunities to touch every student's lives. We're going to be equipping students with essential technology skills to be productive citizens. And we're going to be continuing to bolster those programs that are unique to Irvington and create space for new ones. So when we think about some of those things that stand out today, you know, some of the work that happened in PLTW at the high school level was profound and unique. But what really jumps out to me is our classics program, and thinking about Latin and Greek and the value that offers to so many students. So when we're thinking about our future, we're clearly going to be a school district that's going to begin to set itself apart from others. We're going to have a name and a reputation for academic excellence, and that we have students that are going to be equipped and successful in college and the workforce.
So, and that's great, thank you. Innovation was something you touched on. What are some of the things that you particularly want to deliver 5 years from now in terms of innovation?
Well, I think there's a piece to that. There's direction that comes from the superintendent without question. But we talk about process. We talk about the work that we've done as an administrative team. That when we think about innovation, we want to have spaces where there's opportunities for kids to create, where there's opportunity space for flexibility in learning. So, you know, Raina went into the area of talking about what a classroom can look like and is beginning to look like. You know, that idea of empowering kids and promoting student agency, where kids are taking control of their learning environment or influencing their learning environment, is something that we need to continue to pursue.
Just tied to that, there was mention of the capstone project, which I don't know that we've talked about too much at the board level, but is that something that's tied to that? And I'm just curious how that's being driven at this point. Where is that coming out of in terms of developing the idea of capstone projects?
I certainly would invite Dr. Core to jump in with me, but when we think about that work, it's when we referenced it going back 2 board meetings ago, it's that opportunity for really, and the term speaks for itself in so many ways, right? When we think of a capstone, a culminating experience where students are able to encapsulate so many different aspects of their learning to communicate their knowledge and skill and to have impact on the broader school environment in ways that could be performance-based. So it's, demonstrations of learning, impactful community-based projects. So, it's kind of like in some ways we reference some of the initiative that's come from the Innovation Fund, but it's institutionalizing that kind of work that you're going to be able to see it at key grade levels popping up through the school district. And, it happens in different places and at different times. But for example, you could look at a school that may have an 8th grade capstone project as kind of a learning right of way as the student's journey into the high school.
Is there an area where there's maybe the term that was used was BARD, a tryout mode that's taking place yet in this area?
Well, I would say that's something to be planned for the future, and we're having that conversation with our administrators and our team, and it's work that involves teachers. So when we think about the meaning, building meaning and making it impactful, it's conversation that's not just coming from an administrative table, it's working its way out.
Would the science research program fall into
Yeah.
this model?
I guess I'm just going to back up. I know we're presenting this tonight on December 19th, 2017, but I guess I just want to say, and I know, Catherine, you're asking about 5 years from now, but there is so much good work. Like, all of these examples are the foundation, and I know I scared Michael. I think last time I've sort of upped my how many years for change. I used to say 3 to 5, then I said 5 to 7. Last year I tried to pull off 7 to 10. So I guess what I want to just say is that we're thrilled to share this, and I would say for me personally, in my position, what this has done is the strategic plan has given us a way to clearly target and streamline our work. I think in terms of budget, I think it's really going to help us. I think it's done a lot of good things. But I would feel, remiss. This is my 6th year in this job, and for the last 5 years, we have been implementing the goals and the theories of action and increasing collaboration and doing all of those things. So yes, what I hope in 5 years we continue to expand on that. But I guess I just want to acknowledge that there are so many things in play that are already a function of the support that the board has given us over these last years. And so when we talk about Capstone, I think that whole idea of the passion projects, like there's a lot of sprinkling of the dust of this idea, because Capstone is about I don't want to use the targeting. Capstone is about engaging kids in something that they care about. That's what makes a good capstone project. So it's giving kids the space to figure out something that fits within the curriculum. It's not random, it's not disconnected, but it really takes skills and work that kids have been doing all year long and lets them now turn it into something that drives them. And we all know when we work in jobs that we love and pushes, we engage in really strong, powerful ways, and we communicate to others about our passion. And so the other piece about a capstone, it's not only the experience that the individual student goes through in a capstone, but it's how other kids get to hear about other kids' capstone projects. So it's just it's an entry point into building self-reliance, creating collaboration, expanding beyond the walls of our own school district, whether that be connecting with other kids or other ways. So it just opens the door to broaden our students, our children's experience in the Irvington schools. And I think that we have people who are starting to dip in that. When you talk about Main Street School and the connections they're making through Google Hangouts. So we're doing the pieces. What we haven't done maybe as well as we can that we want to do moving forward is have clear naming of it. What is it that we're doing? What are the goals? And then how are we doing with it? How did it change our students' lives? How did it increase our students' achievement? How did it increase our kids' self-efficacy about being able to put themselves out there and engage in ways that they might have not done before? So I guess I feel like this has been, that's why I felt the 7 to 10, because we kind of have 5 or 6 behind us already. So I felt confident about that. I was going way back. So yeah. No.
But just because I said it just before you started to speak, to me that sounds like what we do with the science research program in the high school. Is that similar to what?
Yes, except the science research. So yes and no. Science research though has a lot of structures and parameters that guide it. And as you know, it leads to the engagement of our student research program. So science research is part of something bigger that our kids move toward and strive toward, and it's amazing. But just today, in our science work, we brought up science research, and we said, how do we build those kinds of opportunities for kids who aren't science research kids, or kids who have other interests and can't make the commitment to science research? And we want to make sure we give that to the science research kids, but boy, do we want to make sure every kid is having that way to engage and explore in an area that makes sense for them. There are some schools that do, they do humanities research. It doesn't have to be science research. So there's lots of doors that we could be going through to support kids individually and collectively. And to me, when you say, where are we in 5 years? I'd like to see that we have all of that is there. And it's there for the taking for our kids.
Well, and that's exactly why I asked the question, because then if you have the vision for where you want to be in 5 years, then you start to align everything you're doing now.
Exactly. And it's what we've been doing. And I'm proud. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of, all of us.
You should be, because you have done yeoman's work, the whole team, over the last 5-6 years.
And our teachers,
in
yep.
Trying to align the curriculum.
Exactly.
And the programs, and you've implemented a lot of new and interesting concepts, including, PLTW and BARD and some of the, the math program. So,
Yeah.
made great strides.
It's fun. It's good. It's good work.
So, and I didn't mean to imply that we don't appreciate that.
I know. I just want to say, you never know who's watching the video.
Not too many.
Oh, don't say that.
I will say, though, I will look for the alignment with the budget, because I think that's critical, because I do agree that the next outcome out of this is, well, this is where we want to go. What do we need to give up? What do we need to realign, and how do we match the budget against those objectives?
I think, as you heard from both Raina, Carol, and me this evening, it's become the way of doing business for us. And as Raina just said so well, it's kind of aligned all these different efforts for us, and has helped really frame things for us, and then given us those structures moving forward. So while there will be traditional flow to a budget process in some ways, the structure and feel is certainly going to be a little bit different.
Can I just add one thing? One of the things, the challenges, and we had this conversation the other day, is at budget time, we're going to share something with you that's a state mandate. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute. So can we link it? Yes. But was it necessarily where we hope to go? No. So I think when, Chris, that slide around those limitations, I think that, we need to be able to have those open and honest dialogues about, well, wait a minute, what derails us? And our goal is to really never be derailed. But, there's also what we control and what we don't control. So I just want to put that out there, that this is our guide, but, other things happen that we don't control.
But that's exactly why you need the guide, because then the guidepost is still out there 5
Exactly.
years, and where you might have to take a
Exactly.
slightly different path, at least you still know where you're headed.
Absolutely, 100%.
I think that's the example you gave with PLTW, that you had to take a step back, but you know where you want to go with it. So,
Right.
I guess I don't give
So we're going down.
Sliding down the line now?
I'm sensitive to the time, too, but my question, I thought that the presentation was a good overview of what is really a very detailed strategic vision document that has a lot of really good information in here. And the overview tonight, where you gave examples and planning for the future, is basically your indicators of success, just to give us obviously some feedback that we're still aligned and that we do have indicators of success. My question is more about the mechanics, that when we think 5 years down the road, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Does the strategic vision look the same? Or does the document grow? Because you've indicated a lot that it's a fluid document, it's going to come to life. Does this stay the same, but there's a companion document that shows indicators of success? Or I'd just like you to comment on, is this something that we should kind of envision is going to get meatier and a little bit kind of more detailed?
I think it's a very good question. So when we think about that last slide, and we talked about the evolution of this plan and just our work over the last couple of months, and saying, well, we have to rework objective 4, we should change the order of the objective, and then we go and think about our process on an annual basis, that when I hold up this binder, by the end of 5 years, I think we're going to be looking at a binder that's 4 times as thick as this. We're going to be looking at a lot of supplements.
Hopefully it'll all be online.
Electronic folder.
Figurative binder. But that idea that it's going to be supported with annual sets of plans that are going to show the growth of the work. It's going to, you could say that there could be a budget supplement associated with it in the end of the year, reflections and assessment of that work. And then there's, I think, be lots of webs that grow from it. And so you think of some of the initiatives that we spoke of tonight, there's going to be program proposals, and with them are going to come program assessments. And so it's going to be in a culture of information that's associated with the achievement of the goals. I think ultimately the vision is going to evolve, right? We're talking about preparing kids for a future that's not yet defined. So we're going to be moving targets and continuing to reach and adapt to be able to meet whatever those current needs are. So this isn't something that stops today. I think that when we look to whether it's the end of January or February and the board actually adopting this, which was an action we probably should have taken last year, and just for community's sake, that when we presented this document that you will see, that essentially it comes back to the February 1st presentation last year, and what we did over the last bit of time was actually take that and encapsulate it in a document and capture the process and the intent of the plan. And moving forward, there are going to be volumes that will be added to this that document our success and the evolution of the vision.
Thank you.
Another question.
You good?
Give me one. How are we coming on
Nope,
hiring
no,
that
that's
data analyst?
I'm sorry.
The data analyst?
That was in the budget?
It's actually a broader question, and I think if we go back and reflect on what our needs are, they are multifaceted. We think about Dr. Kaur's presentation that I'll reference for the third or fourth time tonight, that we are really building a set of data that we're going to be able to use more in different ways moving forward. In curriculum committee, we're starting some conversations about how we can look at some needs that are going to target not only the data piece, but other some evolving needs. So I would anticipate that you're going to be hearing more about this as we move forward, potentially through budget process. But it's we're kind of, as I think Raina said last time, that we're in the place that we need to be in by creating a culture where we're beginning to generate more data, engaging folks and understanding the use of different types of data sets. And then the next steps really become developing those models and systems to enhance it. And when we go from, the document that's like this to the one that's 4 inches thick, then that's when we start to need the support and reading through. But we're on a path there, but we haven't arrived at the right solution just yet.
Mr. Graber?
I'm just waiting to make sure.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, awesome. I have a ton of questions, but I'm
Did
gonna.
you try Dr. Kaur's gift there already?
Yeah, it's half on my shirt, and it was really good.
Is it yummy?
Thank you, it's delicious. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I am. I'm thrilled that it was here. So I have a couple of questions. I guess I'm just I'll limit it to just a couple of questions.
Yeah, we can maybe circle back.
Yeah,
There's some questions afterwards.
The first question is in Objective 1. You talked about interdisciplinary writing, and I had a bunch of smaller questions as tied to that particular phrase. What grade levels are we talking about in terms of just interdisciplinary writing? Are we going all the way down to?
The ninth
the
grade
lower-
program is what I was referring to, Dave.
Okay, well, I'd like to expand that conversation in this question then, because, interdisciplinary writing, when you talk about the BARD work being 6 through 12, I'd be curious to know why we don't talk about that conversation going into the lower grades, considering we want to build foundations.
Because we
and really
do
thinking-
it. I just want to stop you this. We do it, so one of the things that would be helpful, as we go through this, is we can think through what the principals, like, we can now maybe link this so that that's what you're hearing also from the building plans, but we do interdisciplinary writing K through 5 because they do all their social studies and science writing. So that's there. sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted you to know, like, that is something that's already been in place. I was highlighting something we were doing this year that aligned with something, I was trying to highlight something new that we were doing this year in that example.
And so my question is how does that become a bigger focus down in the grades? But I guess you kind of answered that it's already there. How is well, I guess it changes my question, because I was just thinking about interdisciplinary writing in terms of rigorous and comprehensive curricula, in general, across the entire K through 12 piece. So I'll just move on to the second question, which is a couple times in a couple slides you referenced complete implementation of K through 12 STEM program. Very interesting, and sort of really long-term vision there. Let me tell you what my question is. My question is can you talk about STEM beyond Project Lead the Way and how it will be integrated beyond science class and the next generation science standards? Are there groups of teachers already working on this? Focus groups of teachers thinking about how it'll spread, et cetera? Like what does that roadmap look like to get to that place?
So I would say no, not beyond, because I think what we're trying to actually do is have clear targeted goals. So thanks to the next generation standards, they have embedded they really have embedded their expectations around STEM as part of the science standards. So I think what I would say is Project Lead the Way is definitely there, and we're purposely looking for something like that so that we are ensuring that all students, but, and I'll say this, you may remember this, but in Project Lead the Way, for every grade level K through 5, there were 4 units of study: computer science, 2 engineering, and 1 biomedical. We have committed to doing computer science as 1 module, so right now we're doing that 3 and up. If we move to K2, that would definitely be 1 module and 1 engineering module to help us meet the science standards. I think you also know that the reality is our elementary classroom teachers, there's just too many things for them to actually, they will never meet, I don't care what we do, they will never meet all of those science standards. It's not, and all the social studies standards. It's just not physically possible within a given year. So we have to be realistic. So we want to make sure that when we talk about STEM, what is it about STEM that's so important? Well, what a couple of things are, it's the thinking really behind STEM-based learning that's important. It's the integration of science, math, and technology. It's the integration of those engineering practices. It's the implementation of a design process so that our kids understand that you start with something, you go through a process, and you come back. It links directly to inquiry. So there's always going to be overlap, but we need to put it someplace so that our elementary teachers who are teaching 4 core subject areas, plus taking care of children and helping them build their self-efficacy, their social and emotional learning components, all of those things our elementary teachers do in like 6 hours a day, we need to put it somewhere so we can name it and measure it. So it exists beyond, but where we're placing it is through our science standards and through our PLTW standards. But it exists beyond.
And then my third question is just checking in on how the TOE is doing in the water with the assessment work. Because we talked, and it's laced throughout the entire strategic plan, and I just would love to hear like an update on how we're doing, especially since Michael referenced the capstone project piece.
So I guess what I would say is we talked about this like 3 months ago, and so I'm happy to just say what we said 3 months ago, which is it's a work in progress. Nothing's really, in 3 months, we've developed some assessments, we've used some of our PD time to do this, but you know, again, I'm going to just, it is just a reminder. Teachers are teaching all day long, so what we're trying to do is ensure that as they're doing units, we're looking at our assessments, we're building our new assessments today as part of our science work. So one of the things that the teachers needed to do was look at how do you develop a performance-based assessment for a science unit 9 through 12? What would a performance task look like? How do you ensure that you have ongoing formative assessment in your classroom so that we're not only focusing on summative assessment? So that's the update, but I mean, we're just...
Can I build on my question? Because you said
Sure.
you built a couple of assessments and put them in play. How does the student work look from that, like, based on how the
We're not
teachers
there
are-
yet.
We're-
We're not there yet. Like, as I said, like, in other words, the teachers are doing it, they're trying it. Some places they're assessing differently. Some places they're just rewriting the assessment. They haven't even implemented the
In the
assessment.
places where it has been implemented. Am I hearing you wrong? That you?
Yeah.
Did you
I
say-
guess what I'm saying is I don't have any more of an update right now.
I guess I'll build on that. Is there a timeline as to when we think we'll actually get there, where we'll have this process in place?
And just help me, Brian, when you say which process?
I guess we've spent a lot of time and heard a lot about assessment and how do we know things are having a designed impact. And I know we're working on developing the assessments and taking the data and developing the data sets, but at some point we need it all to actually be there. Is it end of this year? Is it next year? Is it 3 years? Just what's
Right.
what's the outer marker so we can, know when we should be checking back?
Right. So we should go back, because the presentation that Chris keeps referring to is the assessment presentation that I did a couple of weeks ago. So, and I want to say, and I don't have that in front of me right now, so I want to say that we laid out, that night was devoted to assessment and talking about the changes. I think it depends. I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I'll use, just because it's so fresh in my head, 9-12 science today. 2021, 21-22 is the change New York State has laid out for the change in assessments, because they recognize that change takes time. So that's when the changes. So we are over these years, we've just rolled out, they just adopted the science standards. We are just redesigning our curriculum right now. As part of our redesign, so this is a shift in practice. As part of our redesign, we're ensuring that we have both formative and summative assessment as part of the initial design. But I would say a reasonable expectation for 20, we're in 17, 18, 19, 20. I would say by 19, 20, I would say that that's a reasonable. Now, that doesn't mean the work's not going on and you're not going to see evidence of it, but I would also say that it takes time to rewrite every unit of study that you're doing as a teacher and implement every unit of study that you're doing as a teacher. So I'm going to also give you, we sit in conflict. New York State, I'm going to use science. New York State wants us to change the standards. They're not changing the assessment for 3 years. So I'm a teacher teaching to a Regents course, and so you're saying, please change what you do. We want more open-ended. We want more inquiry. Oh, but sorry, the assessment we're going to give kids and we're going to judge them on and use, that's going to be the old assessment now for the next 3 years. Same thing with ELA and math. They're going to change some of those to reflect some of the new standards, but the new assessments in ELA and math are not projected till 2021. So if I'm a classroom teacher, I'm conflicted. I need to teach, and I want to teach, and I want to be learning and implementing new standards, but New York State is holding me to still old standards. So I just share that because I think it's important that you understand the dilemma of the dailiness of life. So yes, we have vision, and our teachers, they're on board. They are trying these things. But if I'm a teacher, and I know that there's an assessment at the end of the game here that our kids are going to take, I also feel committed to our kids. And so it doesn't, so I'm not saying this because I don't want you to feel, on this. It's good. We're doing good work. We have good goals, and we're seeing the progress. We're seeing teachers starting to think about more of the performance task. But that doesn't change as long as there's still some traditional expectations that are there.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I guess, does that also militate towards reducing the number of regions that we're giving so that it's not a concern and that we can focus our standards on what we want them to be as opposed to worrying about what a...
It's the goal. We
help?
don't need to give all the regions. It's absolutely the goal.
You know, it might help if during the January 9th meeting, when we do the roundtable session, if maybe the building principals could bring some examples of a non-example, so here's where we were, here's where we're going,
Yeah.
right? So that because I think that might help in terms of seeing what the progress is in that work.
Yeah, I think we'd have to have a conversation about what that looks like and what the intent, what we've been talking about the 23rd is, and creating a different dynamic. And I just want to caution us because, when we step back and we think about the journey that we've been on for 6 years and the work that's been achieved and the work that's been done, we fully own and acknowledge that we have a ways to go and a lot more to do. But I don't want us to function from a deficit model and to say that, well, why isn't there more of this, or how do we see this? That there's a piece to it, and I know there's lots of trust that comes in, and you want to see examples and understanding examples of that progress. And that's a journey that we're on. Just to come back to, there are limitations in how much we can do and how fast we can work. And that's the challenges that we have. You know, there's one arena core, and there's, you know, how many classroom teachers that have a full-time job in and around the writing of curriculum. So, in development of assessments.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
framing it in the terms of we're entering budget season, right? And we talked about this, Catherine referenced you know, we allocated money for a data person, we're rethinking that, or whatever it is. You know, the idea that the assessment piece is so laced throughout the strategic vision, and we're about to go into budget season, think about allocating funding for different programs. I just think that's the frame of reference. It's not about trust, it's not about, are you doing a great job at it or not? It's just, if we're going into budget season, I think it would really serve us well to understand from the building principal level where we were, where we're going, and how we're going to continue to fund that work, right? Because it is totally understood, I think, by all of us, right, that it is a process and it's an ongoing process. But to Brian's point, like, how are we getting there, right? And just looking at the work, like to say, we want to fund, you know, the community wants to support this work continually. Is really the frame, is the only place that's coming from.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I recognize it's a process, and it's not, you know, we snap our fingers and we have it. I guess, just, you know, I'm just trying to understand what it's going to take for us to get there, and just so we, as a board, know, you know, okay, here's what our target is, and how do we get to that target, and to come to Dave's point, what do we need to think about resource-wise allocating to get us there, and is it, you know, and over how many years are we going to need to think about this as a project that we're going to need to devote resources to get us to where we all want to be? So that's really where I was coming from.
I think there's also a second piece that you already spoke to, which is calendar, which is, I think we can think about that as we look at calendar as well, because it's also about the time. Part of the resources is time.
Right.
Maura, or Brian, you added on
Yep,
some more.
go ahead.
A lot of my questions have been asked. Thank you.
Okay, that's, so we vary it up and let you start the future, so that you can get the start, and then
Why? 'Cause I was-
Catherine would be
I was
left
a
with that.
time hog?
No, because you asked all the good questions already.
Yes.
You didn't leave her any good questions asked.
I have one more. When might we see the tech plan?
I would say, it expires, I would say we probably won't start that revision probably until September.
So that wouldn't be this year's budget season, that'd be the next year's.
Well, I think, again, there's all overlap. So the tech plan is alive and well. So there are things in the tech plan that speak directly to the budget, to the strategic plan. So this whole idea of our technology, of expanding PLTW relies on technology. So I think you'll see, we're not revising the tech plan because the tech plan has plenty of pieces in it that are up and alive and functioning. We need to revise it. I think it expired, it expires next fall. So it will, I think, reflect some nice changes that we want to see, but I don't see that it precludes us from linking it directly to our planning for this year's budget.
Okay.
As I think it should be, right? I mean, it's not up until the fall.
We were talking earlier about the use of data in curriculum, but I just want to point out that on the finance side, we already have a data analyst. Part of what you brought in, part of what was put in the budget, Carol, last year was the ability to have an opportunity to look at data in more discrete ways. So that's a shift.
As much as we have time to do it.
I will ask, there was, let's see, it is this slide, the second to last bullet. I don't know if you wanted to speak to that at all in terms of, it's really exciting the work that's going on in secondary with world languages, and clearly it's several years in, so nothing comes quickly. But what are some ideas you're thinking about in terms of opportunities and access to world languages when you're spitballing this?
You want me to speak or you speak?
You can go right ahead.
Okay. So we certainly have some advocates for world language. We always have. I think that in our meeting last week, I think certainly, I would hope that you saw that there's certainly some energy around this from our building administrators. I think that we're not going to sit here and say that we wouldn't love to have a world language program at the earlier levels. I think we've talked about sixth grade, not even right now, even being a full everyday course. There's a lot to unpack and a lot to think about in terms of implementing. Joyce and Deb, I think, are incredibly supportive of trying to find ways to offer, whether that be through clubs, after-school programs, The expansion,
For the folks who watched the video, Joyce is the...
Sorry, Joyce Chapnick, the principal, Main Street principal, Deb Marinello, Dow's Lane principal. I think back to 3 years ago when Joyce and I proposed that cultural program for 5th grade. It didn't get supported. It was an attempt to try and put something in place. Interestingly, it was during this lull where we didn't put PLTW in 5th grade. We had this moment in time. That moment in time now has disappeared because we expanded PLTW to 5th grade. So I think there's no question that we have a commitment. Chris and I have talked about it. A next step for us is to engage with Joyce and Deb and some classroom teachers. Implementing an elementary program is very, very complex, and I know the research. I've been here a long time. I've been part of a lot of committees. It's not that we don't think there's value in it, but if we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right, then it needs to be developed and thought through with teachers, because that's who really is affected by this. And if you want to have a successful program in schools, you get your teachers on board, because your teachers, as you all know, when your child goes to school every day, I could be doing the best job ever, we could all be doing the best job ever, but in the end, it's the teachers. It's classroom teachers who make a difference. And in all of the years and all of the committees, I will say, those committees were mostly parents. It wasn't teachers. And so when we talked about it, we said if we really want to see if this is viable, it's not that parent voice isn't important. Of course it's important. But in the end, it's the teachers who have to make it happen every day. It's the kids who walk into the school, and our teachers need to be on board to make this happen with us. It has to be a collaboration of ideas and thinking if we're going to be successful. And so at this point, I think Deb and Joyce are very open to starting to create that exposure. But we're still taking those early steps to say, how do we talk and how do we engage our teachers in what would this really look like? And I would be very happy to present a day in the life of a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, a 2nd grader. It's busy, and when I say to you we will never meet all those science standards, we will never meet all of those social studies standards, it's a reality. And so we have to deal with the reality and try and balance it with the desires. And we have a lot of parents who aren't sitting here tonight who were sitting here 4 years ago demanding a STEM program. And so I don't like to be the voice of I'm not the voice of no, but I am the voice of slow and steady and process. And we need to make sure if we're going to really be successful, we need a process for doing this, and a process that engages teachers in the dialogue. So.
Well, that sounds like something we're moving forward on in terms of you're looking at a process.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to step over the comments that Raina made before about that idea of looking at the opportunities for club and enrichment short-term as we develop the longer-range vision for what that could become.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. I would like to have an opportunity for comment or questions from the community. So I would ask that, do we want to move the microphone, or is it fine there? Okay. So in our process, I don't know if you saw, we laid it out in hopefully on your agenda there. Is it on your agenda sort of, is there an overview of how our meetings work? But basically, we ask that you keep your comments succinct to approximately 3 minutes or less, that you share your name so we know who you are, and that essentially you address your comments to me as president of the board, and we will look forward to what you have to share or ask.
Hi, I'm Erin Bernstein. I'm the mother of a 2nd grader at Dow's Lane. Everyone knows that, probably everyone watching the video too. I do want to thank you guys for the strategic plan and what you've put together. Obviously, it's a lot of work. I don't think any of us deny the amount of work that goes into any of this. I will just comment I think we're disappointed not to see a long-term vision for an elementary school program. I'd be remiss if I didn't state that, and I think it's fair for me to say I'm saying that on behalf of all of our supporters, on behalf of them. I am curious, though, so we talked about the strategic plan. I just want to clarify, is this a 17-18 strategic plan that we were just sort of privy to, and that's why we sort of reflected back on some of the things that we've achieved? Or is it a longer-term plan? So I'm trying to understand what the timing is of the plan. I'm used to 5-year strategic plans, so I'm a little unclear as to what timing is of this one.
So the overarching plan that the board will look to adopt will be objectives and indicators of success that will encompass the 5-year window of time. But this is specifically looking at today what we're talking about as process, identifying related work and foreshadowing work that will come.
Okay. So when we met with Joyce Chapman and with Deb Marianello, we were clear that we were talking about transitional opportunities for foreign language in the hopes of implementing an early language program at the elementary school. And I guess to Catherine's point, if we don't have a goal that we want to do this, and Raina, I caught in the meeting that we had last week that you did give the 7 to 10 year time frame, but if we don't have a goal that this is actually something that we want to do, how do we get there? And I think that's where I'm most concerned. If you said that we were looking to do this in 5 years, well, certainly we still wouldn't be happy. We would know that we were on a path for developing the process and that there would be milestones along the way that we would be able to assess and understand where we were in that process of developing the program. So without seeing any clear indication that we want an early language program, and I guess also to circle back with Dr. Harrison, you mentioned surveys. We did a survey. We had teachers sign the survey. I do think there was hesitation on the part of a lot of teachers to sign the survey because they wouldn't necessarily want to go public with something like this, not knowing how the district felt. Obviously, teachers who aren't tenured, they might not feel as comfortable going public with signing the survey. So, but some teachers did, and the community did. So when you talk about surveys and getting feedback, is it just about for programs that you're looking to do? Because we have a community that's shown support for the program, and I don't see that community support being addressed. Sorry, that was lengthy.
Yeah, no, I think we've been pretty clear in that we see the value and understand the value. We've identified, I think, 2 parts of that first step, and one is looking at providing some opportunities for enrichment related to language experiences, and I think that's something that we believe in and something that we heard from you as a group. But then I think Raina identified those important next steps for us is to figure out what that process looks like. So I can tell you that Raina and I as a team, our principles that were referenced, we believe in it. We got to figure out what that implementation model looks like. And from there, I think we come forward with what the proposal looks like for that target. And there's layers of consideration. It's the practical implications, how you make it work within the school day. It's what that capacity is for a child. And then you get into the model, program delivery, and of course, the related budget that's associated with it all.
I guess the example I'll share was actually an example that you shared from your list of suggestions, which was, well, can they do language during computer lab time? And that was a great idea, but they don't have computer lab time. So I think that there's sometimes a lack of knowledge of what actually happens in the day. So we were happy to hear your ideas. As you know, many of them were like, yeah, that's a really good idea. Several of them actually were like, oh, good idea. But there are also there are limitations and parameters to the school day that I think you're not always aware of. So we're trying to, and we want you to know them, because what we don't want is for you to just feel like we're saying, nah, no, that's no good. It's not that. But there are things that don't necessarily exist that I understand why you thought it did, but it didn't. So I think we have to find the balance and also build your knowledge and understanding of what is possible.
Thank
Could you, yeah.
Oh.
Could you pass it on to the next person, please?
Am I done with my 3 minutes?
I guess your 3 minutes are up.
I'm Michelle Soto. I have 2 children, one in 9th and one in 11th grade. I know I only have 3 minutes, so thanks all for being here, but I'm going to move on. First, I want to say that I really appreciate the interdisciplinary writing. My daughter, who is in 9th grade, is really thriving, and I wish my now junior had it. I think it would have been great for her. I'd also like to mention my concerns about the implementation of next year's change in schedule for high school. I'd like you all to consider that. Parents haven't heard back, or at least the majority of us have not heard back. I'm sure there are some parents that have. We have no idea what's going to happen. There are concerns with that schedule. It is now almost January. We have no idea what's going to happen. Our kids are very concerned about that schedule, how that will look, how that will play out with their schedules for next year, whether or not they'll be able to take classes and languages that they currently love. So please consider that during your roundtable and speaking with the principal about that. Another concern is technology. I know that you guys mentioned it. You touched upon it briefly. I know that there's a huge problem with technology in the high school. So children are given the opportunity during the course of the day to not only work on projects on their Chromebooks or whatever gadgets they have, but often have to rely on their own data to do so. If we're going to require students to work on projects during class, they should be provided with the technology to be able to utilize that. I just want to echo the language. I applaud your efforts to work on it. I know that there are things that happen during the course of a day that sometimes parents don't understand. I run a preschool, but even if that's an after-school program, it's probably something that parents would really appreciate. So thanks for doing that. And then lastly, I just want to mention both Dr. Harrison and Dr. Carol mentioned social-emotional wellness. And there was recently an issue brought to a lot of parents' attention via a Facebook post. Some of you may or may not know this, where girls' bathrooms are not being fully stocked with the appropriate necessities. In speaking to social-emotional wellness, I just want to say that we should certainly be stocking whatever cabinets or bathroom items that are there so that girls are not uncomfortable, so that they're not calling us, their parents, from the bathroom, or so that they're not having to walk to the nurse's office embarrassed to ask for something. I don't know why that's not happening, but certainly something the board should be aware of if you're not already, so that you can address it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I certainly, first of all, I certainly appreciate your anecdotal feedback on the writing program. That's good to hear. It's been such a good experience. Mr. Cohen, with respect to the high school schedule, after the holidays, Mr. Cohen is going to be sending out a communication to the school community to let them know where he and the committee are in the process and identify next steps. So that will be coming forth after the holidays. He and I actually had a meeting with respect to it today. Technology problem in the high school. So I just want to we do have Wi-Fi across the campus. Mm-hmm. We're going to be pushing out an update to it in the not too distant future that will address some of what we would call saturation concerns, where it expands bandwidth and it should address the issue that you shared. With respect to the feminine hygiene products, we actually, I can say it's, Ray and I both talked about 6 years, right? We've been here 6 years in our respective roles, and we have many staff that have been here many, many years longer than that. And it's not that we have failed to stock dispensers in the bathrooms. Dispensers were installed many years ago and were never stocked. So it was never part of our process. It was never part of the culture. The hygiene products had always been available in the school nurses. But hearing the feedback from the one young lady that came forward and really give her accolades and the courage for speaking to Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen did start dialogue with our facilities department and made its way to Ms. Stein, and all this was going on well before there were Facebook posts and surveys related to it. So we're actually in the process of ordering dispensers that are going to be installed campus-wide in not only the larger multi-stall restrooms, but also in the single occupant stall. So products are on their way. But it's one of those things when we talk about being flexible and having to adjust to needs. When we struck our budget for this year, we didn't think about spending thousands of dollars to purchase dispensers and products. But hearing the need and seeing the need, we're taking a step in that direction. One thing that I don't want to prolong the discussion on something like this, this is an area, one of those little examples of how we try to respond to what needs are, because many school districts you'll find don't have them because they become vandalized, that folks break into them to take, you put a quarter in to get something out. Well, people then break into it to get the quarters out, or whatever the case may be. But when we step back and look at it, it's a completely logical and reasonable request. And we're following through and doing it, despite what trends we're hearing from other schools, because we think it's right for our kids.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Yasena Sorel, and I would like to thank you again for all your wonderful work you've been doing for this district. I mean, it's evident that you've done a lot, and we are really lucky to have you. So I would like to echo a little bit my concern of my colleague here, colleague by now, Erin. It's regarding the world language program. We were really hopeful when we came here after we received a letter from Mr. Hanna with regards to mentioning early world language instruction potentially in the strategic plan. We were hoping for a little bit more concrete information about potentially, let's say, how many years it will take to have the implementation in place for the FLES program, for example. So my question is, I know you don't want to be concrete with years again, however, still, we would love to know approximately, if possible, what we are looking at. And also, when it comes to process, we understand that it takes time, but learning from other districts that have been successful in the implementation is definitely the key. And I've noticed that they're very helpful. Because when we were contacting them and doing our surveys, they came forward without any problems and gave us a lot of useful information that we can share with you as well. The other thing that I would like to mention is, you're right about teachers. Teachers should have a big say into what happens during the day, and empowering them also would be wonderful. So when we talked about the computer-based learning, we understood what you were saying. The computer lab time would not be able to include it there, for example. However, then, I don't know if you saw my email, I thought, okay, I understand your point. So there are other ways. Let's empower the teachers and see when they could actually find time within their schedule during the week, and maybe have the software directly, projected on the screen in each classroom. That way, nobody would really lose that much time going to different rooms. That's just an idea that there's a way to work around it, really is. And if you really include teachers, they will tell you when it's the right time. And I think that's wonderful. And the third thing I would like to say is, I understand that STEM was very important to parents before, and that's why we were going towards STEM direction and are going. But I have to also mention that the world language has been desired by this community for many years. It's that the STEM at the end was chosen to be a big focus, but world language has been always desired by this community for many years. So in the past, for some reason, there was, it's not possible to do it all at once. However, we're still thinking, we should be thinking flexibly, and we should find ways to maybe take away a little bit from here, take a little from there, but find also space for something that this community has wanted for a long time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leslie Dannon. I've been a member of the community for about 12 years, but now I have a little kindergartner. And in 2020 hindsight, I wish I had become more involved with the board earlier on, so I could have a better insight into the workings of the board and the administration. But the last few years, through friends and Facebook, and I've got a pretty good idea. My son loves Dow's Lane. He's having a fantastic time there. He couldn't be happier to get up in the morning and go to school. But this world language thing is kind of stuck in my craw a little bit because, from what I understand, members of the board and members of the administration have been involved in the community for 5, 6, plus 10 years. And what I keep hearing over and over and over is it takes time, it takes time, it takes time, and yet you guys have been here a while, so, and I kind of got, I got an email from Principal Marianella the other day about it's time to vote again for Best of Westchester and let's keep Irvington on top. And at the same time, I was really upset because I went to a birthday party on Sunday, and I have a little nephew who's in first grade in Greenburgh, and he's taking Mandarin in class twice a week. And I'm thinking, well, how can Irvington be Best of Westchester when people have been asking for a program for, I don't know, a decade, and we're still trying to figure out how we're going to do it when the river towns are able to do it, but we're not. Greenburgh is able to do it, but we're not. And it just so happens also, I'm passionate about it because my child, for some unknown reason, at the age of 3 or 4, wants to learn languages. And I'm driving to Rye so he can take Spanish classes and Mandarin classes because he asked me to. But so there is a personal interest in it. But just from an overall perspective, I don't understand how Dr. Kaur, because I'm sorry, I know Mr. Hanna, but you say it's a long process, but you've been here a long time.
But we weren't trying to implement it all these years, so I just want to clarify that because you're saying that. It's not like 5 years ago we said we were going to do it and we haven't done it.
Right.
So certainly you've surfaced, and I think we've had such really open and respectful conversation. I think that, Dr. Harrison has been pretty clear. We are looking at it, but we haven't been trying to implement a program. I was not in this position for all of these years. I've been in district for 17 years, but not in this position. And again, and I'm happy to hear what you're saying. I think we're saying we are committed to figuring this out, but I don't know what more I could say to you right now that would make it sound or feel like we're more committed. I'm not going to say to you by such and such day. I would be crazy to be sitting at an open board meeting and just say that. That's not the way we run a district. So we're hearing you loud and clear. We sat last week. We had a really good meeting. I want to say you came up with an amazing set of recommendations, and I would hope you'd walk away saying that we were really encouraged and agreed that there were things on there we could do right now, and we are doing. The hardest part is the part of implementing in our schools. We're saying we need a plan. I'm reflecting on my 17 years and the committees that I was on them. I didn't create them, but here's what I can tell you. They were, and Beth, I'm looking at you, those committees were huge and very parent-driven. And I think in my seat now, here's what I've learned. I've learned that if we're going to be successful, you need to have teachers at the table because that's who this is going to affect. So we're with you. There's no argument here. We're with you. I'm not going to commit to something by a date that I don't feel comfortable doing. That would be not wise. But you're hearing it. And Beth, I'm looking at you again because I feel like you've been here for all these years. I hope this feels different to you. But I can't say that it does or it doesn't, but that's where we are now. So yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Let me just ask just one last thing. So you've said you're discussing with Principal Marinello and the principal at Main Street about after-school programs and the ideas being floated out there. What's the potential to getting something like that implemented for 2018, 2019, to have an after-school program?
There's no question.
Because,
Absolutely.
whatever the language is, I don't care. Because to me, it's a matter of opening the child's mind to being multilingual, and it will be.
All right, did anybody else want to make a comment? Thank you for those questions and comments.
Okay. My name is Beth Proper. Thank you, Dr. Kaur, for somehow bringing me into this conversation. I was going to talk about something totally different. But I just want to say to Mr. Hanna and to anyone else here, what I would like to point out, and I think this is why you received the reaction from some speakers, is you actually said, well, some parents came with this request for STEM 4 or 5 years ago. But when we look back historically, and I'm like the Methuselah of, parenting in the district, because I have one in college and one in 6th grade, in 2005, we had 3 days of town meetings. And it wasn't just parents, and that's another issue. When we talk about the community, we're not just talking about parents. We had retired people. We had empty nesters. We had people who lived here and worked and didn't have children, and one of their top priorities in those 2005 town meetings was foreign language, that it needed to be expanded. And yet, from 2004 until today, we've actually had a net loss because we lost our programs in 4th and 5th grades. So for the purpose of clarifying why you might get that kind of response from people here, you have to understand that they also understand the history of what's gone on. And I do think it's wonderful that this topic that's been revivified by the younger parents and is being considered by older parents who may not benefit from it, but we know it's of benefit to the entire community and to the district, not limited to parents, not limited to children, but to include the entire community and the value of our community, which is intrinsically linked to the values of our schools. And we have an excellent school district. And I would add that I wouldn't trade Irvington to move my kids into the Greenberg School District merely because of Mandarin. There are funding issues that are different in Greenberg. There are programs that come from federal and state programs that they get that we don't get. We are in a very different situation. And now I would like to go to the topic I was here to discuss, which had to do with technology and STEM. So if we go back 5 years ago, there was a presentation to the community on Project Lead the Way. And I don't think we've had one since then. And I think it's perhaps time to have another one, because I actually attended that presentation with some other parents from different grade levels. And your architecture teacher did a presentation about, from the high school perspective. We had Ms. Carney, I guess, presenting, I don't know what the grades were.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And if it's really being expanded and it's a STEM curriculum issue, I think it's time for everyone to have another look. I mean, you're talking about data points, you're talking about programming that has value. I think in the community you might find different perceptions, and I think if you want to clarify those perceptions, it would be good to communicate. Again, it was a wonderful program. I don't know how difficult it was to put on. It was a reflection of what's going on in the schools, and I think perhaps even the board members would be interested to see that again.
Just so that you know, it was also presented last year at the science fair in this room. The whole PLTW program was set up in this room.
I was here.
And we're going to do that again. And we actually didn't get great turnout 2 years ago. They did all that work in planning, and I think
that is true.
We had like 15 parents, and to be honest with you, most of them, their children were part of the presentation. So we actually embedded it as part of the science fair because we get such a great turnout for the science fair. And this year, we're going to try and do that again, because I'm with you, Beth. Like, I would love our community to also, like, know what that is. And
yeah, that was a very involved group of people who showed up that night, actually, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I know that, I don't know the name of the teacher who does the architecture unit. Pat
Costabile.
I mean, that was a huge number of people in there, fascinated by what he was doing.
So
that was
Beth, I'm just going to ask if there's anyone else.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We'll move on. Thank you.
One
Well, okay, in this case, is there any other questions? Because we're going to wrap it up after this one in terms of our community comment.
I did have one other question about tech access in the schools and sort of equitable access among all the classrooms. I do know that there is something going on this winter to update Irvington Middle School ports, that there's some broadband issue. But there seems to be this feeling in Main Street School to a certain extent that not every classroom is having the same technological experience. And I do know, Raina, that there's the art and science of teaching. And, you know, sometimes some teachers may not take advantage of that, and that's fine. That's a differential between styles, and each student gets a different experience. But the question is whether each classroom in Main Street School, I heard there were some updates over the summer, now has the ability to have Google Hangouts or those experiences. Is that a change that's taken place?
Yes, every classroom. Yeah, the technology is consistent throughout the building.
Okay, and the update in in middle school now, that has something to do with the ports and the walls or something?
Yeah, access points.
Okay.
Updating access points.
Over the winter break.
Increasing bandwidth.
Okay.
It's getting pushed out through the winter. And what Raina was referencing, the one thing we have to think about with the elementary schools, Wi-Fi just went live 2 months ago in the elementary schools, and with that, buckets of Chromebooks have gone into classrooms, and so there's, that equalization is absolutely occurring, but now the need for the professional learning and the support for those that may not have the same level of experience as some other teachers.
Right, and also the data issue, that the kids really shouldn't be using their parents or their own data.
No, that-
And their data is our data. It's not really their data.
I know the feeling, Matt.
Yeah.
All right, our grand finale.
I just want to end on one note. Raina, I don't want to take away from the meeting that we had last week. It was very productive and constructive, and I think we appreciated being a part of the conversation with you and appreciated your feedback. I think with that being said, I think you do have a lot of community members, granted a lot of us are parents, or all of us are parents, who would be willing to help through this process, and also to talk to the teachers that we interface with and things like that. Like, we are also here to help, not just to give you angst and ask for things. So we are all in this together. I hope we share the mutual goal. I think we do. And I just wanted to end on a positive note.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we move to our very limited consent agenda. Could I get a motion to
So moved.
accept our agenda?
Second.
Second. All right. Are there any questions related to items on this agenda before we vote on it? Very good. Can I get all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And with that, our next meeting will be a business meeting that takes place on January 9th at 7:30 p.m. right here in the campus presentation room.
Can we revivify?
Thank you.
Could I get a motion to
So moved.
close our meeting?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. Can we revivify? I'd like to revivify.